Hello and welcome to the Cyclone Insider Show. I am Travis Hines. He is Eugene Rapay, coming to you stateside in week one of the college football season. And lucky enough for Iowa State, they head into week one 1-0 after a massive, huge, critical, significant victory over Kansas State in Ireland last weekend. Eugene, before we talk too much more about Ireland or Iowa State, how are you, my friend?
I'm pretty good. How are you? I mean, I know Coach Campbell had talked about just being worried about coming back or adjusting back to being stateside or jet lag. Do you feel any of those effects?
Do you think he was worried about me and our colleagues that were overseas? I don't think he was too worried about our jet lag, although, I mean, I was.
Yeah, do you feel it?
I feel good. A bunch of people have asked me that, and I said I have a hard time sleeping on planes, and certainly did on the way to Ireland, especially with somebody like reclined all the way into my lap for 8 hours. So I didn't sleep at all, and we got there at like 8:30 on Wednesday morning. Luckily, was able to get right into the hotel and took like a little nap, and then took a second nap later in the afternoon, and still pretty much did not feel good for like 2 days. Coming back, much better. Like got back early evening to the central time zone, was in bed before 9, and I've been pretty well good to go. It helped that my kids were not up ungodly early today. Had a scare at about 4:30, but everybody went back to sleep. So I'm feeling pretty good. I know people are really worried about my sleep hygiene and my jet lag situation, so I appreciate you asking, but I feel pretty good. So I assume Iowa State feels fine. They're younger and in better shape, and have like actual doctors and nutritionists to help them get through this.
Yeah, it is a positive sign. It is a positive sign. If you're good, they're probably good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much those guys got to really see Dublin or get around. I think it was pretty minimal. I know that first day they were there, they went to St. Patrick's Cathedral. I think they had a little ability to walk around, but certainly Iowa State fans made the most of their opportunity. Like we came back Tuesday, and I'd say my flight was maybe half Iowa State fans. So still a lot of people over in Dublin. I think most people went early, and then the game was kind of the crowning moment of the trip. But I think some people decided to stay extra. I know a few people that were like going to go tour Europe after the game, but Iowa State fans showed up in force, and so did Kansas State fans. Like it was really interesting to see a European city overrun by Iowans and Kansans. A cool event. Like I really do think, for programs, for fan bases, I hate taking games off campus. I hate taking games out of these iconic stadiums and these iconic environments. But as far as, we'll call it a neutral site game. As far as neutral site game goes, I think it was a truly extraordinary experience for, the 10,000 plus Iowa State fans that were there, the 10,000 plus Kansas State fans were there. And then the rest of the stadium was sold out, so there were plenty of, local or at least regional. I know a number of people came over from the UK specifically for the game. But really they do a good job putting that game on, filling the stadium up and making it, feel like a spectacle. And at the same time, it felt like a college football game. Like it was sloppy and ugly to start and then thrilling to finish. Like, is there a better encapsulation of college football than that? Like it really was. I've said this a few times now, like watching my social media feed just absolutely melt down in the first quarter of that game with these teams are no good. The Big 12 is no good. How are these top 25 teams? Throw away the preseason polls to then in the fourth quarter, like college football is back, baby. What a game. Like it was like, man, we're already doing this in week 0. But no, it was a really cool experience, I think, for the fans, for the program, certainly with the victory. And me, I had fun. It was a good trip. Glad to be back. Glad to be back home, at least digitally across the table from you. I missed Tuesday's press conference, so we'll get into South Dakota and what Iowa State has this weekend. But I do think it is worth talking a little bit about what happened in Aviva Stadium last Saturday. I don't think, before we talk about what this game means, I think it's worth talking about what we learned about Iowa State. And my contention is probably not a whole lot. And I don't say that as a pejorative. I think it's just the truth. And I think that is the truth, whether the game was against Kansas State or against South Dakota, in Ireland or in Ames. A week 0 game, especially in the transfer portal era, is really not going to give you, except for in extreme cases on either end, like really good or really bad, probably going to give you a true indication of what a team is going to be when we get into October, when we get into November. Like, I think the signs point upward for Iowa State, but I think drawing any conclusions would probably be foolhardy. And I would say the same thing for Kansas State. Like, they lost and they probably feel like they're absolutely like a lap behind. But I think, again, it's really early, and what happens on August 23rd is not going to define a season. It's not going to define a team. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see these next 3 games, specifically for Iowa State. But I didn't come away from this game on Saturday in Ireland feeling like we answered any big questions for Iowa State. You know, I think like there are interesting things to talk about, but I do think we still have way more questions than answer after 60 minutes of football.
You don't want to irresponsibly jump to conclusions after one game or one quarter or one half, like a lot of people?
I mean, we can. I'm going to choose not to right at this moment, but like, I mean, it's more fun that way, but I think it's probably more truthful and accurate to be like, let's have a little patience here, which I know is in short supply for everyone these days.
I think the jury is definitely still out, but I felt like I came away with some positive takeaways on the defense, especially just seeing healthy linebackers for the first time, and also just what that rotation would look like. I felt like we saw at least 6 or 7 different linebackers out there at one point or the other. Caleb Bacon, I thought, looked good. I mean, the defensive line, Dominique Orange, we knew he was going to be good, but I felt like for the people who didn't fully understand what a block eater does, like that game encapsulated Orange at his best being a block eater. I mean, on those 4th and 1 or those short stands there, he was getting like 3-4 guys his way, and that opened the gates for some of these other guys to get those key tackles. So even though he only finished with, I believe he had like 1 or 2 tackles without looking at the box score, I mean, his impact was great. I mean, PFF gave him like the highest value or second highest value in the game. Marcus Neal, I thought, looked good at safety. But yeah, like you mentioned, it is only one game, but I think while the jury's still out, there are some positive signs with that first performance on defense. Offensively, though, yeah, still a lot of questions I would like to know.
Well, and I think before we talk about offense, I think it's worth staying in the defense, because when we talk about patience, when we talk about not jumping to conclusions, like when we're talking about this game, we're specifically saying, you know, Iowa State didn't wrap up a spot in the Big 12 title game. Like, they're not in the CFP yet. Yeah. But I think on the other end, like, probably don't want to jump to conclusions about that secondary too, and those young safeties, you know, that got burned pretty badly twice. Like, that could have cost them the game. And I think we're going to talk about Jeremiah Cooper's move to cornerback later, but they did give up a lot of experience in that back end to move Coop to corner and to put those young guys back there. And it cost them, like, in the exact ways you would anticipate young guys getting beat early, you know, overreacting to a play fake, you know, not being able to keep the right leverage there and getting beat over the top for a big game. And when I say patience with those guys, like, let's see, before we say, okay, they're going to be terrible on the back end all season, that they're going to be giving up big plays, like, let's sound the alarm there. I think that's specifically a place, where you look at those guys in week 0. If the coaching staff is doing their job and the players are doing their job, those guys are at a drastically different place when we get to the Iowa game, when we come out of the bye and they play Arizona at the end of the month. Like, those guys are going to probably need a few weeks to really feel, you know, like they know the defense and they know how to react to Big 12 offenses, a Big 10 offense. Like, I think that is, while that was concerning to see, because, you know, that can be an Achilles heel for a defense all year long if they don't get that cleaned up. But I do think, like, obviously that is a place also for correction, because those players are so young, because those were really their first meaningful snaps of their careers across the line. That is an area, though, like, let's see what it looks like this weekend against South Dakota. Like, what is Iowa going to do? Like, obviously not known for stretching the field, but they're going to have seen that on tape against K-State and try to exploit it. And then when we get to the end of September, like, how does that look against Arizona? I think, like, that is really, as important as these next 3 games are for Iowa State, I do think like a lot of this is how do you build up to that reopening of the Big 12 schedule, because that's obviously what's going to control your fate in the postseason as much as anything. Like these next 3 games matter a lot, but less than the following 8 Big 12 games.
Yeah, and I know that Matt Campbell has placed a lot of emphasis on this first month, and rightfully so. I mean, you come back from that marquee matchup. You have South Dakota, who FCS team, but you don't want to take them lightly. And also it's just a good platform, I feel, for some of those younger guys or some of those lesser experienced guys to take on an opponent. Sure, it's not high major FBS, but just getting those reps, those in-game day reps are going to be very valuable, especially for those young safeties or some of the line. What's the offensive line going to look like? And just also just more so for the wide receivers who are working with Rocco Beck. We saw a bunch of different guys get targets. What's that passing attack going to look like now after 1 game in their belt, and then they play against South Dakota? So there's meaningful stuff here in this first month of football while we wait to get to Big 12 play. I mean, obviously the Iowa game is one, but also that Arkansas State game too on the road, just having true road game experience there, that'll also help these guys moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned the questions offensively coming out of Saturday. I think those are as much still there as much as anything. Like Rocco Beck didn't look great for a lot of that game, throwing high, throwing wide. I think the one ball was in the 3rd or 4th quarter that should have been intercepted. My assumption there, somebody ran the wrong route with how awful the placement of the ball was and how the 2 receivers kind of looked at each other like, oh, damn, did we screw that up? And I tend to give Rocco the benefit of the doubt there, but still was not sharp for a lot of the game. The offensive line, the pass protection, because I think it was more than the 5 guys across the line, was kind of miserable for the first 2+ quarters. Like they gave up that 4th sack early in the 3rd and then kind of figured it out. But it was a major problem in the first half and early into the 3rd. The running game was non-existent until Abusama and, more to the point, Carson Hansen got going late in the second half. So I do think like there's some growing pains there too. The guys that we expected to see at wide receiver, Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend, barely played. It was Dominic Overby, it was Eli Green, it was Brett Eskildson. Not exactly the guys that we were expecting to be the marquee wide receivers. And again, to go back to the patience, line here is that, Jaden Higgins was not Jaden Higgins until a few weeks into his Iowa State career. So to expect, those 2 transfers to come in and immediately light the world on fire was probably overly optimistic. Still, this was after what we saw last year, with Eli Green. And then who was the kid from Army that didn't play at all?
Isaiah Alston.
Like, I do think like that is in the back of people's heads. Like, okay, like obviously like Xavier Hutchinson and Jaden Higgins were elite transfers, like the best, among the best in the country, if not the best. But we've also seen the flip side here at the wide receiver position where the guys that they bring in really don't make an impact. And I think it's still way too early to draw that kind of conclusion. But you do wonder about it. But on the flip side, like I thought Overby looked really good. Eskildson looked really good. Eli Green had his moments as well, but I did think like Eskildson and Overby kind of had some of those moments where like, oh, okay. Like they showed that like those are more than just guys on the 2 deep. Like they look like they might be able to play a little bit here, but I do have way more questions, or at least less or more unanswered questions. I think they're the same questions we really had going into the year. I think they just are a little more unsettled than on the defensive side, where you've kind of the things that you were like, how do these fit into place? Mostly fit into place outside of the safeties. Where offensively, I still think it's, how do you refine and build up to what we were expecting?
Yeah, and as the game went on too, I felt like the offense overall got better, and it probably helped that the offensive line or the pass protection figured itself out as the game went on, which was a positive sign. I think they also kind of showed that these mistakes are fixable, or at least, you just got to give people time. Like, I feel like after the first half, there was plenty of panic and overreaction. Like, oh my God, is this what the offensive line is going to look like? Rocco is going to run for his life for the rest of the month. Like, what's going to go on here? But I felt like with them kind of just getting things together, that kind of leaves the optimism that, it's still very early on. Other guys can do the same too. And that's how I feel with Townsend and Solo. Like, definitely a yellow flag. I don't want to raise the red flags yet, but I'm definitely curious, like how long is it going to take for them to really work their way or settle into this offense? Are they going to settle into this offense? We're just going to have to wait and see. But I did come away feeling impressed with what Eskildsen and Overby did, especially as guys who were, deep in the rotation last year. Yeah, they played, but mostly on like special teams, or in Overby's case, he was redshirted. But to see them make those big moments or make those big plays, especially for an offense that really needed those moments, especially early on, those guys can play. And I did like the swagger that Eskildsen brought. He also got he pulled out the Conor McGregor and the Vince McMahon and got a little shout out there. Like, what's going on? He's becoming
in Ireland.
Yeah.
I do think, like, again, though, the bottom line coming out of here, for all the questions we still have, for all the things that need to be cleaned up, Iowa State's 1-0 overall. They're 1-0 in the Big 12. And I do think, like, as much as you don't want to, put the cart before the horse, it is inarguable that, like, they are in a great position. They just won what should have been a road game, like, in terms of the way their 9-game schedule breaks. Like, that's essentially a road game. And now they are 1-0. K-State's 0-1, and nobody's even going to play a Big 12 game for 3 more weeks. So, like, they are well positioned here. They have to follow it up. And, we talked earlier about how these 3 games are important, not as important as the Big 12. But if you really want to dream big here, and you think that this is a team that can win the Big 12, or it can at least get to the Big 12 title game, and now you're looking for that second CFP invitation that the Big 12 did not secure last year, winning this game is big. Beating Iowa and avoiding losses to South Dakota and Arkansas State are paramount, right? Like, that's how you really build a strong seeding CFP resume, and that's how you build a strong invitational CFP resume if you're not able to win the Big 12. And again, like, those feel like dreaming big scenarios for Iowa State on August 28th. But we saw this team win 11 games last year. We saw the Big 12 only get 1 team in the CFP. If you're not thinking about these things, at least from the outside, or understanding the stakes at play here, I think you're missing the boat a little bit, because as much, and ultimately is going to come down to the final score for the next 11 games. But when you're looking at this thing from how it'll unfold and what the implications will be on a grander scale, these 3 games are super critical. You can't lose on Saturday. You can't lose at Arkansas State, and then look at your resume when we get into November and be like, man, like, those are that's a bad blemish. Like, whatever you do, even if you beat Iowa, even if you have a great Big 12 season, like, those are stains that are hard to wash away in the eyes of a committee that you have to wonder about. Like, are they looking for reasons to to not believe in the Big 12 because of the lack of a marquee brand program, and for the fact that last year the national reputation was pretty low.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to summarize it. I feel like now the margin for error moving forward is definitely a lot slimmer. But also, when you come back from Ireland with that marquee win, like, they did what they needed to do. Like, they went there, they went overseas, fought through jet lag or whatnot, fought through the elements, repainted lines, got the win on Saturday.
Yeah, how bad did that look on TV? Those lines
looked terrible.
You could, I mean, they weren't good. I think they were definitely better in person, but they were not good. Like, who's really got to be mad is Aer Lingus, whose logo just went away at midfield. Like, whatever they paid for that, did not get their money's worth.
That was my thoughts exactly. It was like all the branding and all the other logos in the middle of the field have faded away. The Big 12 logo, you can't even tell that it's there. But yeah, I mean, you come back from there, you can't just fall apart, or you can't just, have a letdown game, or just like have a hangover after a game like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, like, I wrote this after the game Saturday. I thought Campbell was, like, already immediately like, how do I refocus this team? We're set up for failure. We have the hardest schedule in the country. Like, dude was laying it on thick, even for him, for these things. And, like, I don't know that he's wrong. I haven't done a full diagnostic of everybody's 4-game schedule to start, but it's unquestionable that playing this game when they did, where they did, has a real domino effect on these next 3 games. Like, if Iowa State had not played this game, if it was a regular season where Kansas State is being played in November, they don't have a week 0 game, we talk about South Dakota like as being tricky because they're a top 5 team, but I don't think anybody's going in there with real concerns about it. The Iowa game is then the standard Iowa game, like all standard narratives apply. And then Arkansas State, kind of the same deal. Like we're going to be like, hey, a tricky game, Iowa State should win. But now you're talking about, a real emotional and physical and mental load that they have early on in the season that kind of alters the way you look at all subsequent games before that September bye week. And it makes it tricky. It really does. But I do think like the benefits are obviously clear too. You got, instead of a road game in Manhattan, you got a neutral site game where you had 10,000 of your fans there and 20,000 independent or unaffiliated fans. And you get to start the year off 1-0 in the league and overall, and really had the whole platform of college football to yourself for a day, unless anybody was locked into that, whoever Kansas and UNLV played. But it was, I think, a calculated gamble by both schools that obviously paid off better for Iowa State than Kansas State. But again, like I also think like both teams are probably going to like that extra bye week during the game, as we saw, how much would have Campbell paid for a bye week last year, an additional bye week, as those linebackers were going down in mass. Like, don't discount having that extra bye week in here as well.
Yeah, no, and with the bye week, as soon as the schedules were released, that was the first thing that came to mind. 3 bye weeks, like they would have absolutely loved that last year, and it's 1 bye week each month, just perfectly spaced out. Would have paid off big time, but unfortunately, it doesn't work like that.
He's Eugene Rapay. I'm Travis Hines. This is the Cyclone Insider Show. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and KXNO every Thursday night at 6. Now we're going to switch gears to the present and future for Iowa State here on the Cyclone Insider Show. South Dakota, 2:30 p.m., Jack Trice Stadium, 2025, home opener. Eugene, you were at the press conference on Tuesday and got to hear Campbell in person talk about this while I was making my way back. But I do think they are trying their best to have all the respect and focus for this game as it deserves. South Dakota, top 5 FCS team, went to the semifinals of the national tournament last year, and a very familiar face at quarterback in Aiden Bauman, son of former NFL player and quarterback Todd Bauman, Vikings great Todd Bauman, who has had a really productive career for South Dakota, throwing for over 6,000 yards in over 2 years as the starter. Again, a tricky game, but what was your impression of what Matt and the players, what their mindset going into this game is attempting to be?
Yeah, I felt like the way you described Matt Campbell in the post-game press conference, just trying to refocus his team and try to scare them a little bit or just let them know what's at stake. I felt like Tuesday's press conference was just a continuation of that. And I felt like Matt Campbell felt more business as usual, more than usual, just going into this game. It was pretty impressive to see, kind of a different tone shift. And you were curious like what coming back would look like or how they would feel coming back. But with the game itself, it's just more of the same. Like they're treating this like it's a big opponent. Sure, they're FCS, but they've seen FCS over FBS upsets, and they're not trying to get caught napping here. With South Dakota, that's a team that had one of the top offenses in FCS last year. I think that they actually led the whole FCS in yards per play last year. And they got their quarterback, Bauman, back, and their running back, Charles Pierre. So they have a high-powered backfield, but there's a lot of new pieces around, like a new defense. The offensive line has a bunch of new starters, and there's a new coach in Travis Johansson, who actually at one time coached at Grandview nearby in Des Moines. So there's a little connection there. And Bauman, of course, who was a former Iowa State quarterback at one point. Didn't really never saw the field here. But so if he doesn't ring any bells to you guys listening at home, don't feel bad. They're treating this game very seriously. It feels like coming back, the whole sense has been just trying to get back to normalcy. They made players go to class on Monday after returning from Ireland. Tuesday, they had a productive practice. And then Wednesday was the true return to their normal routine game week practice schedule. So it's just business as usual. They feel like they'll be all systems go for Saturday. players feel rested. They don't feel any jet lag, kind of like how Travis Hines felt coming back. So it seems like Iowa State's in good shape, but you never want to take an opponent lightly, and they're not doing that.
Yeah, and I think with Bauman, like people I think the question was even posed to Matt on Tuesday, like that's going to have a chip on his shoulder. And like, I don't even know if that's true. Like the path for him
so
to get
long
to
ago.
and the path to getting to the field was a tough one, I think, with that quarterback room. But I do think at the same time, if you're Bauman and you're coming into this game, you have to feel like you have something to prove. Like, I don't know that you're, necessarily have it out for Matt Campbell or the Iowa State coaching staff or for the Cyclone program with the way things unfolded. He's obviously had like a very productive and fruitful career for South Dakota, but you got to feel like you got something to prove, right? Like you're the son of an NFL quarterback. You're on a Big 12 roster and it just didn't work out for you. Now you come back, 4 years later and have a chance to strut your stuff. And that's a huge opportunity for a competitor. Like, even if you have no hard feelings about it, the competitor in you has to just go into overdrive to show like, hey, I can play. Those other guys could have could play, but I can play too. And I do think that is going to be potentially, you have to consider it as a factor for Bauman going out and having a really good game, because he's a really good quarterback. Like, he's had a very productive career and he is extremely experienced right now. He's got more experience as a starting quarterback right now than Rocco Beck does. And, we talk about Rocco as being one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the league and in the country now in year 3. So like, this is, again, it takes like all these little pieces that make this game a little trickier. It's not 1 + 1 + 1. Like, these are compounding effects, I think. But that's about the extent of where my math analogy can go here. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, no, I feel like if you're Bauman, any FBS team, you'd want the opportunity to present yourself, to show what you can do, especially as a multi-year starter. And I believe he's a senior now. So, of course, you want to, last shot at an FBS team. You want it to be a good one. And, of course, it's against Iowa State. So maybe that's the added cherry on top. But I feel like as a competitor, he was probably getting up for it either way. As much as other people want to dive into he's got pictures from his Iowa State game in his locker. He's been circling this date since the beginning. I don't know if he's that scrappy about it, but I'm sure he's definitely up for it. I don't know if if it was Iowa State or if it was Iowa or if it was any other FBS school, would it change? I feel like it'd probably be the same level of amped.
Yeah, it kind of just probably gives you an obvious avenue to put all that adrenaline and preparation into all summer long in a way where if it was, playing Wisconsin or something, maybe that's not the case. The one thing I do kind of want to go back that we skipped over, but you were talking about Campbell's kind of demeanor at the press conference. He crashed Rocco Beck's press conference in Ireland. Like, we should probably talk about that. I do think
you had the video perfectly, by the way.
Thank you. I don't use that as an excuse where I have to do more video now. Like, that's still your domain. I do think I don't know how much of that was tongue in cheek, how much of that was jovial, how much of that was generally just basking in the moment. But knowing Matt and and being in the room and having it literally, when I say he burst in, he did, there were 2 swinging doors and it was boom, Campbell's back immediately, bombastically speaking. That was weird. And then to explicitly name the Kansas State athletic director, he didn't use Gene Taylor's name, but I heard he said their AD, to really come back in and restart his press conference to deliver a pretty pointed message there, I thought was, number one, kind of funny. And number 2, really interesting because of, and I wrote about this, I think, repeatedly, Kansas State and Iowa State are jockeying for the same bit of real estate within the Big 12 and nationally. And I think that has upped the animosity, I think, between the programs up a little bit. And I think you saw that bubble to the surface with Campbell coming back in, to deliver a full-throated defense of black uniforms, I guess, which I can't believe in year 10 under Campbell, we're still talking about black uniforms as being a relevant talker. But here we are.
Yeah, but the uninitiated, which included myself at the time, because I didn't understand the full context when the video was first sent to me. But at a pep rally the night before, or the week of the game, rather, the Gene Taylor, the K-State AD, made a joke about Iowa State fans or Iowa State not knowing their own colors because they wear black all the time, or they wear black so many times. And Matt Campbell comes back into the press conference days later after the win. He already had wrapped up his portion of the press conference. He had no more questions to take, burst through, as Travis said, and demanded that someone asked him about black uniforms. He wasn't just going to start about it. He demanded a reporter to ask him about the black uniform. To just fully set the scene there.
Yeah, and it's also funny because like these prep rallies are usually like the exact platform to take like I'm not even going to say PG-13, like PG or G shots at the team you're playing. Like I saw somebody tweet that John Walters, voice of the Cyclones, made a joke that they went to St. Patrick's Cathedral, which was open in 1100 AD, or the same year that Bill Snyder started coaching. These are the exact platforms to take good-natured rib at your opponent there. So I did find it interesting that Campbell felt it worthwhile, not only to address it, but to go out of his way to address it. So again, I don't know how much of it was jovial or tongue in cheek and how much of it was pointed, but I have a feeling whatever it wasn't one or the other. It was, there was a mixture there. What exactly the percentage breakdown is, I couldn't tell you, but I guess now I kind of want to see them playing the Big 12 title game to see, because they're going to wear those damn black uniforms if they do. So I that's worth watching. If once we get to December, if both teams are on top of the Big 12 standings.
December 6th. So let's make it happen. Manifest.
The other thing I wanted to talk about here is Jeremiah Cooper, like we mentioned earlier, moving to cornerback. You're talking about an all Big 12 safety who 2 years ago, I believe, was tied or right at the top nationally for interceptions, moves to cornerback. And I think that's probably his pro position. So as much as this is a sacrifice for him to change, I do think it is good for him probably in the long term when you're talking about his professional prospects in the NFL. But it gives Iowa State really two anchors there at cornerback with what they have with Jontez Williams and now Jeremiah Cooper, assuming Cooper is going to be the cornerback that I think we all probably think he is, because we know he's a great defensive back, and we know that Iowa State typically, and John Haycock knows what they're doing personnel-wise. But that is still a significant move that they, lied about in the preseason. But Cooper is now a cornerback, and I do think it'll be what was your thoughts talking to Matt and talking to Jeremiah about what went into that decision and how they hope it unfolds over the course of this final season for him in college football?
Yeah, according to Jeremiah, they came up to him 2 weeks ago, and Matt Campbell also, at first I was like, did they really come up to you 2 weeks ago, or did they come up to you 2-3 months ago? And this was actually secretly in the works the whole time. But according to Cooper and according to Matt Campbell, this conversation took place midway through fall camp, allegedly 2 weeks ago. And they offered Cooper this. Yeah, they offered him this option to switch positions. To Cooper, it felt like a no-brainer. He said that it was a platform for him to show off his skill set. And like you said, Travis, this would definitely help him professionally to just have that tape of him at cornerback and help his draft stock. But Cooper was just gung-ho about it. And then after a few days in practice, or a few reps in practice, he felt comfortable out there, and they've decided that they can run with him. They feel confident with him there. They feel like his knowledge of the defense and just his savviness, he's lined up at various points of the defensive, secondary. So he's familiar with what everyone needs to do at all 4 or 5 positions. So he feels confident there. Right now, it's just a matter of getting the technique down or getting more of the nuance down of being a cornerback. But as we saw in the Kansas State game, he looked pretty solid out there. He didn't look bad. He almost had an interception on the sideline there. But Cooper moving a corner definitely was a big move. In the preseason, they teased it he's taking some snaps there. And then we kind of caught Broomfield with his pants down. We're like, wait. He's taking snaps at cornerback, and you just thought you could just gloss over that. And as much as they tried to double down and say that he was a safety moving forward, it looks like the secret is now out. The cat's out of the bag. There's no more lying. There's no more jokes. There's no more hiding it. We know that was actually, yeah, that's his real position moving forward. He switched from safety to corner.
And obviously that is super fascinating, like on its face and on its own. But I do think it's also fascinating what the inferences we can make about how Iowa State views both those position groups as well, both corner and safety. They obviously felt better about their depth at safety than they did about their options, at least at the top of the depth chart at corner, or however they weighed, those different variables of how do we get the best 11 on the field to have the best defense, throughout the course of the year. They felt moving their all Big 12 safety to corner was going to give them a better option, which I think, as we talked about earlier in the show about those young safeties growing up these first few weeks, that's obviously the big bet here by Iowa State, or their belief is that these are really good young safeties that whatever the growing pains are and whatever the bumps are, they're going to be able to get through them and come out the other side as a better 11 or a better 22 in terms of the two deep on defense. And I think it's an interesting bet, right? Like that. I don't know that that's going to make or break the Iowa State defense this year, but it is something absolutely to keep track of, is that they feel like those young guys on the back end are going to put them in a better position to win than playing whoever else at corner other than Jeremiah Cooper, whether it was Trey Bell or Benny Nyogi or whoever else was on the depth chart there, that putting Cooper at corner allows them to unlock some things elsewhere to make them a better, defense from top to bottom.
It's funny, after now going through my full first offseason, preseason, I'm just not going to – now I see why no one just believes what the coaches say anymore. Now I fully get it. I mean, Trey Bell, after all the hype for Trey Bell and Quentin Taylor Jr., I thought we would see one of them, and we ended up seeing none of them. But on the flip side of that, they were very complimentary about their safeties throughout the whole offseason, preseason, and they were naming guys.
Coleman was like, they made him sound out to be like the second coming.
Yeah, and then in preseason they were talking about Carson Van Dinter, and I was like, hold on, let me just pull out the roster sheet a little bit. Which guy is that?
Yeah.
And Carson Van Dinter, he did get burned on those. Yeah, he got burned on one of those touchdown plays, but I felt like he played with the aggression that they probably loved that they saw in preseason. I mean, he was scrappy, he was getting after it. He was in on the forced fumble with Drew Surges. But I came away impressed with some of those younger guys. I mean, of course, you don't want to see them burned or cooked on those long, easy home run touchdown plays. But outside of those, that blemish or that blink where they blinked and boom, touchdown, I thought they looked pretty good. Marcus Neal was pretty impressive. Jamison Patton, Tayshaun James, and Carson Van Dinter. I liked what I saw from them outside of the touchdown.
Yeah, I think it was telling, too, that when Campbell got asked to evaluate those guys in the secondary, he was really complimentary. Like, it wasn't like, hey, we got some stuff to clean up.
Yeah.
And clearly it was very much like positive reinforcement, which is both for the fan base, but I think more importantly for those players, because they know, like, we're in this for these guys to develop and progress to give us that chance later in the season to be at our best. Like, to me, that was a signal of they are putting their chips in on these young guys being able to do the job, and like they're not wavering from that even after two pretty big miscues that could have cost them the game and didn't. So I did think that was a telling answer from Matt that really, I think, reinforces what we've seen from them, like their actions in terms of moving Coop over to corner, and they're reinforcing it with their messaging both publicly and I think to the players as well, which is something to keep an eye on this weekend and then certainly next against Iowa. This is the Cyclone Insider Show. He's Eugene Rapay. I'm Travis Hines. Be sure to catch us on KXNO, YouTube, and wherever it is you get your podcast. Let's now talk a little bit about Eugene's story about the reunion that's coming up this weekend to celebrate the first ever Iowa State bowl game championship, the Insight.com Bowl in 2000. And there's no more 2000 bowl game name than the Insight.com Bowl. But Eugene, I thought the story that you had today was really interesting. That predates my Iowa State knowledge. So it was kind of cool to really get a sense of that team that I think still does loom large, in Iowa State fans' memory, and certainly in the record books and in the pantheon of important and great teams that won 9 games and won the first ever bowl game. Like, give us a little bit of a sense of, kind of your feelings about that team and how they think about themselves and how they're remembered.
Yeah, I remember last year, obviously, with the 2024 team, having that best start and eventually breaking the record for most wins in a single season. I don't know about you, but I felt like I spent so much time last year looking at the year-to-year records, and you saw a lot of bad. There was a lot of bad in between 1938 and 2024. But for me, I was probably 4 or 5. No, I was in first grade when the 2000 season happened, and I have no connection to it. Of course, I saw the numbers on the page and the year-to-year records, but just talking to Dan McCarney, talking to Sage Rosenfels, talking to Ryan Harklow and Chris Anthony and James Reed and some of the stars of that team, they really painted a picture of what bad actually was. And that McCarney, when he came in, they obviously had 0 wins. His first 2 seasons, they had 0 wins in the season before his arrival. First 2 seasons, they won a combined 5 games. And then in the seasons leading up to that 2000 team or 2000 run, they were 1-10, 3-8, 4-7. And then boom, they turn the corner and they get to 9-3. And in that moment or in that season, McCarney made the historical implications very well known. Like, you guys will do something that will be remembered forever. You guys will do something that's never been done. It's going to change the way that a lot of people are going to think about this school or think about this program. And while all the players had acknowledged what it would mean, and especially just with the season that they had as they were going through it, now looking back at it 25 years later and hearing the stories, it was very cool to see, that older perspective kind of looking back at it. And they're looking forward to this weekend. It's going to be very emotional. But at the same time, they're also glad to see where the program has gone since their days. Like after that 2000 season, they ended up going to the bowl game 2 more years in a row. And now we see where Matt Campbell has taken the program, and they're excited to see that Iowa State, it wasn't just a one-time blip. It wasn't just a one-time peak. Like they got to 9-3 and then they fell back into the dark ages. They're glad to just see that continued evolution. For some of them, they've never been back to Ames since 2000. So they're looking forward to just seeing how campus has changed, what Jack Price looks like now, and just get to meet some of the players that they've watched on TV and root for.
My first job out of college was in 2009 at the Marshalltown Times-Republican, and I covered Iowa State football a little bit and had really no frame of reference for Iowa State football. Like I was in high school during Seneca's, run. Like that was probably all I could have told you about Iowa State football because they were such a non-entity regionally. And, growing up in Minnesota, going to school in Wisconsin, they were a non-entity. So I knew nothing about them. And then that 2009, essentially, and that 2009 team went back to a bowl game in the first year under Paul Rhodes. And I remember, doing some research for it and looking at their bowl record and coming across that they hadn't won a bowl game until the year 2000. And my head exploded. Like, how does that happen? And I do think the further you get away from that and the more success Iowa State has, and we don't need to recriminate the Paul Rhodes era, but there was success there. And then now, obviously, the unprecedented success of the last 10 years under Matt Campbell. I don't think anybody watching this or most people watching or listening to this probably need to be reminded about the dark days of Iowa State football. But there are going to be more and more people that really don't understand how difficult the road to where they are now was. And it started, really in earnest with that 2000 team, as you mentioned, that really broke through a barrier that was, I'm sure, embarrassing. Like the fact that by 2000, we'd already seen a huge proliferation of bowl games, and you accidentally have good teams every 10 years, right? Like if you're a real high major football team, every now and then it coalesces and you have a really solid year, even if it's not a historic or national championship type year. You go win a random bowl game a couple times a decade, and that hadn't happened at Iowa State. So I do think it's important to contextualize how far they've come, about how late that was to get what, in retrospect, feels like a pretty minor accomplishment, but in the moment and in the grand scheme of Iowa State football's, evolution of the last 25 years, I'm sure was a seminal moment to look back on, to at least not have that be a talker on the recruiting trail. And every time you talked about Iowa State football, even a little bit, that, yeah, man, it's nearly the 21st century here, and we're without a bowl championship.
Yeah, and just piling on to that, it was their first bowl game appearance in 22 years. Like, they hadn't been to a bowl game since 1978, and they lost that one.
Yeah.
And it was also their first winning season above 500 since 1986. So there was a lot going on there that they just broke through, and they started that season 4-0, which probably, Matt Campbell talks about complacency and trying to avoid that. They probably could have packed it up there, or pat themselves on the back. Like, wow, we started 4-0. We already did more than in 1 month than we did in the past 5-10 years. Probably could have closed up shop, but no, they kept on going with it, and now here they are. They had the breakthrough, and they're being remembered for it 25 years later.
Yep, 25 years later, Saturday, South Dakota, Iowa State, the 2000insight.com Bowl. Team will be honored between the first and second quarter, right, Eugene?
Yes.
And they're expecting 50 players, 8 coaches, and their families. So a pretty good turnout. Nearly half the team, or a little less than a third of the team, or about a third of the team. So that'll be cool to see what'll, I'm sure, be a standing ovation for that team, and like an important time in Iowa State athletics too. Like, we saw the 2000 men's basketball team come back, this past winter to be honored. So, it does feel like that time was really, with McCarney and then, Floyd and Eustacia going forward, like that was a really transformational transitioning time for Iowa State athletics to really move into a much more competitive era that it now kind of finds itself at the absolute highest levels now, when you're talking about what the men's basketball team has done, what Bill Fennelly's program has done, and now certainly, what Matt's team did in 2020, what they did last year, and now, as we talked about earlier, is on the table for this team. So it is 25 years later, it does feel like whatever momentum was there and gained and lost along the way, is at a high point right now, really, across the athletic department. That's all we got for today. He's Eugene Rapay. I'm Travis Hines. This has been the Cyclone Insider Show. Be sure to check us out, YouTube, KXNO, and wherever it is you get your podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.